The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of The Offer, where we will discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this streaming show on Paramount Plus. And joining me today on the panel are Andrew Hermiz. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Dom. What's going on?
And Mike Creavey. Hey, Mike.
Hey, good to be here.
Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should be sure to hit the bell to get notifications. I want to tell you about another show on the network you are sure to enjoy, which my fellow panelists are involved with, which is The Secrets of Star Wars, which with the new Andor series starting just as this episode drops. So go be sure to check that out. You can find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Wars. I want to start with a little bit of listener feedback. This was actually some timely feedback. It came in just recently, but it's about some older shows we did on the Godfather movies. This was from Tim Lucchese. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Tim says, I'm a longtime SQPN listener, and my wife and I became proud patrons earlier this year. Just recently, I finally started listening to Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, and quick story about an older episode. My last name is Lucchese. About 20 or 30 years ago, my dad was on a trip for work. He sat in his cheap motel doing paperwork and turned on the TV. Godfather 3 was on, and he'd never seen the third one. He was intensely focused on his work when suddenly my dad heard people discussing the need to kill Lucchese.
Okay.
He later told me he never looked around so quickly in a moment of panic. I made sure to pay closer attention the first time I watched the movie. Brilliant. That is great, Tim. That is a great story. The dangers of being an Italian American watching the Godfather movies. Awesome. All right. So we are here to discuss The Offer. This is a biographical drama miniseries created by Michael Tolkien about the development and production of Francis Ford Coppola's landmark 1972 New York gangster film, The Godfather, for Paramount Pictures. It stars Miles Teller, Matthew Good, Giovanni Ribisi, Colin Hanks, Dan Fogler, Juno Temple, Bern Gorman. The series premiered in April 2022 on Paramount Plus, of course, and it ran 10 episodes. I should also mention, I can't leave out of the list of stars, Lou Ferrigno as Lenny Montana, playing Luca Brasi in The Godfather, in the film within the show. If the Incredible Hulk shows up on your cast list, you gotta talk about it. You know? Anyway, so the reason we're here together is because the three of us have talked about the Godfather movies. The three of us, the 1, 2, and 3. And when this came out, I knew we had to talk about this now. So, overall impressions of this as Godfather fans. How about you, Mike? What's your overall impression?
I really enjoyed it. And, for any of our listeners, from sort of a family friendly perspective, we do, of course,
Yes,
it's not a family show. I honestly, and I'm not shocked by pretty much anything, per se, but I did honestly, the only criticism with that I found is just from a rating standpoint, I don't know. I wasn't in these meetings with Paramount. I wasn't in that world. I don't know how often, people day to day are saying certain words, but sometimes I was just like, do you guys could you maybe take that out 6 times from this episode? So it did sometimes a little distracting just because it's nothing I haven't heard, but other than that, just the show itself, I really enjoyed it. It was the first thing I wrote down was just very entertaining, for one thing. And we'll get into this a lot more later with the details, of course, but the way that it built and built and built to the point where, you're seeing sets, a lot of suggested, like you don't see like many full scenes or something where you're watching a scene from The Godfather being filmed.
Right.
But there are some, and the way that they do some of the really big ones, I had a couple favorites I wrote down we'll get to later, but that was probably my favorite part, was just really seeing it like that, the way it comes together, in this show was just really well done.
Right. The way they built the sets, they recreated these sets and the scenes, but from the behind the scenes perspective. You're right. Yeah, that was pretty wild. How about you, Andrew? What's your overall impression?
Yeah, it was sort of a mixed bag for me, but overall, I did enjoy the show. I think it's not what you would expect, especially if I think the more you know about the actual story behind The Godfather, it can kind of throw you off a little bit, because I don't think this show aimed for accuracy. Right. I think, like you mentioned, Mike, it aimed for being entertaining. I think the characters, they're more caricatures of the actual people, and not maybe full on accurate displays of how they really are or how they really were at the time. So I think once I kind of bought into that, and I kind of realized what the tone of the show would be, it's kind of more comedic and feel good than you would think. The Godfather movies are pretty heavy. I felt like this show was like a little more. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely many dramatic moments on this show, and I'm not saying that it's like a total comedic type of show, but it was a lot more in that vein than I thought it would be. And then, but once I accepted that, then I really enjoyed the show, because the cast really stands out. I think almost everyone was cast perfectly, except for maybe Giovanni Ribisi. I think he was a little over the top with his Joe Colombo. And I enjoy Giovanni Ribisi. I think he's a great actor, but I think he kind of threw me off a little bit. But anyway, I mean, for the most part, I thought the cast was really good. I thought Matthew Good stood out, and Juno Temple as Al Ruddy's secretary stood out. Overall, I did have a good time. But I think once you accepted that this is not a show so much about the actual filming of it, because like you said, there's not a lot of, like, the scenes really show before and after they cut. Right. So they made it a point to not reenact any scenes, and I guess how could you? It's it's The Godfather. You're not gonna do it better. You're not gonna do it justice. But yeah, because of the performances and because of some of the lighthearted, funny moments, it was really an entertaining show, and I had a good time with it.
It was definitely not a dark, gritty retelling of the story. This was bright and colorful, and it was very much a period piece set in this, 70s era of Hollywood. In some ways, that the cinematography reminded me a little bit of the Coen Brothers movie that we talked about, the Caesar one.
Hail Caesar.
Hail Caesar. Yeah, I mean, not exactly, but sort of idealized Hollywood.
Yeah, it's more. Yeah, it's very. I was about to say it's very Hollywood.
Yeah.
Looking type of film. Yeah, very plasticky.
Yeah.
Very, very bright.
So, and to Mike's point, lots of bad language. There is a lot of, a lot of, let's say, Anglo-Saxon words in this. One in particular used a lot. There's some violence. There's the king. I mean, it's a mob. It's about the mob film and includes the mob, so you can't get away from that. And a little bit of sex. Not a lot. I mean, like TV sex, which is to say there isn't. You don't see a lot, but it's on screen and suggested. One of the things that I was watching this around the same time I was watching the Light and Magic special on Disney Plus about industrial light and magic. And there was a quote in there from George Lucas, which really I thought applied to this, which is that Lucas says the secret to making movies is persistence. And if there's one word that sums up this series is persistence. Just like I had never heard the name Al Ruddy before this. Like I didn't know who. Like when I thought about The Godfather, you think of Coppola, you think of the actors. You don't.
Yeah.
I never thought of who's the producer. I don't know what do producers do. Who knows? And this is a show about Al Ruddy, the producer, the guy who made Hogan's Heroes, making The Godfather, and his persistence. And I thought that was very interesting. And in fact, in some ways, it makes the most important person in the making of The Godfather, Al Ruddy, over Francis Ford Coppola. And in fact, it shows some ways that Coppola was really dependent on Al to get things done. And I don't know how real that is, but it was very interesting to see this depiction of it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that threw me off was like, I've always like heard all the stories about Francis Ford Coppola having to fight and with the studio and try to get his vision to cast the people that he wanted to cast. And
right.
Al Ruddy was, I mean, from my knowledge of it, which is, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the making of The Godfather, but he doesn't stand out like too much. So yeah, that was kind of sort of a surprise. I mean, I don't know if it's a case of like they really wanted Miles Teller because of the type of actor he is, he could really lead a series, and maybe they wanted to focus on that, or maybe there's more to Al Ruddy than is out there in like, in books or any stories from the making of the film. So the emphasis on Al Ruddy was a surprise to me as a viewer.
What was kind of weird about this for me was I was watching, I don't remember exactly when it fell in there, but somewhere in there when I was going through the offer is when I went to Top Gun 2.
Yeah.
And so there was this weird, like,
yeah, me too.
Yep. Yeah, but
I had the same experience.
His character's not a whole lot different in some ways, or like, I mean, just like the Miles Teller thing, But I guess it is. It's a different character for sure. But it reminded me. It's like when he's starting to date that girl in New York, which I was just thinking to myself, like, that really chewed up some screen time. Like, it had absolutely like no effect on the plot of the show whatsoever. I was kind of like, why would they even bother with that?
One of the weaknesses of the show.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
I think I know why. But
the only reason I bring her up is when she comes and she sees the scene when they're filming the restaurant scene, and he's been trying to explain to her what it is that he does, and then she says at the end of that scene, like, I think I know what you do. I think I get it. Like, you're a problem solver and that kind of thing. And I thought, I'm not at all comparing myself to Al Ruddy or any producer, but what I actually kind of felt sometimes through this show was there was a little bit of a parallel to some stuff I ran into in the Army a lot, where like you have like there's all this stuff going up, like if you're like a middle rank officer, and you've got like all this stuff going on, and it's just like that whole world up there at like brigade or division or whatever, and then there's all like your people who are trying to do the actual stuff, the actual like the work. They're trying to put this briefing together, put this battle plan together, whatever it is. And sometimes I spent an awful lot of my time just basically getting in between those two worlds, or just finding myself there where it's like running interference, or you've got some completely ridiculous decision being made, or someone's just off above you and they're mad at people because something went wrong, and like you sort of are just there and you're like taking all that heat so that your people can get the thing done,
right?
And then also being the one who knows what they need because you're close to them, and you're the one who goes up and you're like, listen, you got to make this right because you guys are doing this and this is the effect it's having, and it's and so I actually, in a weird way, I was kind of like, okay, I feel like that job exists in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And I felt so much, but the funny thing is I'm watching this show and I'm feeling so much stress, thinking to myself, like my real life wasn't, as stressful as this show is with that. So again, like what we're talking, maybe what Andrew was saying too, I don't know how much of that was, they take several things and cram them into one meeting or something, because they give you the impression that it was like that every single day. And I don't know, maybe it was, but But yeah, it definitely made that, you felt that in each episode.
So a couple of things. The project actually was the role of Al Ruddy was originally supposed to be Armie Hammer.
Really?
But he
That's
got
right.
replaced. He dropped out pretty early on, and that's when Miles Teller came in. And in the credits, before every episode, they did say, based on the recollections of Al Ruddy. So,
Right.
so Ruddy was involved somehow. I don't think he wrote a book. I didn't see anything about a book that he had written or that someone had, interviewed him for, that sort of thing, like a memoir. But I don't see but the producers and the writers were all these other people. They weren't Al Ruddy. I think he got a producer credit on this, but I think that's more of one of those polite things, like it's your story, so we're giving you a producer credit. So it was very, it was an interesting look into this world. Let's talk a little bit about the actors. We mentioned a little bit about Miles Teller as Al Ruddy. I had seen Miles Teller in a couple of things, maybe. He was a bit of a revelation. I thought he was really good in this. I believed him. I believed his drive, and it was good. It was good. He's a little stoic at times, but
Yeah.
he's a little bit leading man-ish. He's the opposite of, say, Tom Cruise, who can be manic on a set, whereas he's stoic. But I think that worked for this because you needed someone who was steady through all of the craziness from all the directions he was getting it. What did you guys think of Teller?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. He played it pretty straight, and like I mentioned earlier, the other characters like Coppola and Puzo, they were more like comedic relief. A lot of times, and Ruddy just played it straight pretty much throughout the whole series, and I think it definitely needed that because again, if the focus was going to be on his character and his sort of journey, and a lot of most of the conflicts of trying to get the movie made was that sort of weight was put on his character's shoulders. So he didn't have as much room to be sort of zany or wacky as maybe some of the other characters did. He didn't really have that freedom. So I think he played it right. And Miles Teller, I mean, since Whiplash, he's been like one of my favorite actors and one of the better leading male actors, I think, in the industry. And he in my eyes, he hasn't done wrong yet. So so I thought he played the part just right for the series.
Yeah, no, I thought I don't really have much to add. I agree, and it's I think sometimes, I don't want to say if it threw me off, but near the end, I got a little not confused. I don't know what the word is, but near the end, like as they start to focus more on like the next step, is where I started to, they're really focusing on him and his next. I didn't really, I didn't really care. That's not to be cruel, but just as just a viewer, I was like, I don't really, and then the big build up to like, oh, it's, The Longest Yard, I'm like, okay, that's all well and good. Great, great movie. But it's like, that's not like, it felt like it to me. I'm still at that point thinking this is a show about the Godfather, right?
Yeah. So
like, you need to end it somewhere. It made sense. I don't think it was wrong. I found it difficult for some reason. And he's there at the end with Burt Reynolds. And I was just like, I don't know if like I would have ended it there. They felt like it made it not about the Godfather at the end.
They definitely should have ended it with like if the show, if it was more centered around Coppola, it would have made total sense to end it with like him getting the call to do Godfather 2,
or the winery. No, I don't know. That's so beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
Something thematic. Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, since this is more Ruddy's more the main character, then yeah. And I agree. It was kind of
it was a weird 10th
I didn't
episode.
care either.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of the subplots, again, with Ruddy and the girlfriend, like, again, didn't care for a lot of that stuff, but he was, for the most part, he played the part really well. And then when it focused on the main story, it was a really good show.
Yeah. I want to I don't want to spend too much time on the rest of the cast. It's a huge cast. But I want to mention some of them. There are a lot of British and Australian actors doing American accents. You got Matthew Good as Bob Evans, with a very nasal accent, but he was so good. I just think he did such a great job.
He was great. He was one of my favorites on the show.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like, that's Emmy, level, because that character it wasn't a caricature. I mean, he went through a lot of different places and sometimes the unexpected ways. So I really like that. Dan Fogler as Coppola. I mean, he looked like him. I mean, on point there.
Totally.
And I liked him. I mean, he was a very likable character, very likable person. You believe that this is a guy who's, going to be a great director. But, he hadn't done much up to this point, up to the first Godfather. And this was his big break. Bern Gorman, who just is awesome in everything. He always plays a great villain in a lot of stuff. But in this, Bluthorn was not the villain. You know what I mean? In fact, I don't think anyone ended up being the villain. There were people who were obstacles that had to be won over, but no villains. Well, Joe Gallo
Joe Gallo is probably the closest.
Yeah.
I was just going to throw this as a total random side note, but Jack Ballard, the character Paul McCrane plays, who's that kind of jerky side producer guy or whatever. I knew he looked familiar, and I finally placed him because, oddly enough, I'm looking at the cast list, and he's pretty much next to Eric Balfour, who was like the prop guy, and I was like, both of them were on 24.
Yes.
So I was like, this. I was
right.
like, oh yeah, it's Graham Bauer, right? And Milo, I think was Eric.
Milo.
So that was just
Yep.
a fun connection to 24. It's been a while.
So Barry Lapidus. So far, everyone has been a real person. Barry Lapidus is a composite character of a lot of different people who kind of played the role of executives who got in the way. And he's played by Colin Hanks, who's the son of Tom Hanks. So
he's looking and sounding more like his dad.
Yes.
I think like every time I see him.
Yes. And then we have Giovanni Ribisi, as you mentioned, as Joe Colombo. He played Colombo over the top. I mean, that was a larger than life mafia Don sort of character. I kind of have an affinity. I mean, in some ways, he's as larger than life as the Godfather was. You know what I mean? Just like sort of a little bit over the top, and maybe that was intentional. I don't know, but it was kind of like you said. I really love Giovanni Ribisi anyway, so it was good.
Yeah.
Well, is that, just to ask you guys real quick, my impression was, I think it was pretty clear that they were trying to sort of just put him within the show as the most real world analog to the Don pretty clearly. Was that the impression you got, that they were going for that kind of?
Yes. I mean, Joe Colombo was a real guy. He really got shot at a rally for the Italian American League and all that sort of stuff. But but he was also the closest thing in the movie to a Don that they had to deal with. And I really thought it was interesting how Al kind of became friends with him, went from adversary to friends, breaking bread, even to the point where he had to be warned off by Colombo's guys. Like, you don't want to be seen here. Like, that makes you one of us, and you don't want to do that. So
I like that speech, that exchange, like, you're coming up to a line.
Yeah.
That was just the courtesy of that was
right.
Was neat.
Yeah. There's a story my dad tells. My dad's best friend growing up was one of the lieutenants for the Patriarch crime family in Boston. And one time was visiting him. The Don was in the hospital. My dad went to go see his buddy about something and left. And then those guys came out and were on the front page of the paper coming out of the hospital. You know, the patriarchic crime family lieutenants keep vigil for the dawn. And my dad like missed it by like just minutes.
Oh, wow.
So it made me think with Al, you know, like, you want to be careful. You don't want to be seen with us. I'm like, yeah, it was the same sort of thing. And then, of course, I got to talk about Juno Temple as Betty McCart, who people will recognize Juno Temple from Ted Lasso. She's Keely Jones in that. She's very strong female character. Doesn't, you know, I liked the female characters in this story. They were all strong women who didn't, you know, sleep their way to the top, that sort of thing. There wasn't, you know, there was a mention of the sexism of the era and that sort of thing, but like it was never, you know, Betty got things done. I mean, in some ways, without Betty, the Godfather wouldn't have been made, you know. So it at least in the depiction in the offer. So Juno Temple is just awesome. She's a breath of fresh air, I think.
Totally.
I just realized she was Anne Hathaway's friend in Dark Knight Rises.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Which also had Bloodhorn in it. I just lost his real name.
Burn Gorman.
It's all connected.
Burn Gorman, yeah.
All 6 degrees.
That's right.
A few of the recurring cast I got to mention. Anthony Ippolito as Al Pacino.
Great. So good.
He really put on Pacino. The stance, the hunched shoulders. Yeah, it was remarkable.
Especially in the restaurant scene, I thought, and like when Bloodhorn tries to go up and congratulate him, and he's like in his mode, and he's like, you know, but yeah, he really, I thought, looked just like him there.
And then you know, a couple others maybe. From Patrick Gallo as Mario Puzo, also looked really, you know, really good as Puzo, constantly eating, which is awesome because his wife in the beginning telling him, you know, you got to watch your diabetes, you got to watch your sugars. And then the rest of the movie, he's just eating all the time. I just thought it was hysterical. So let's talk about this movie.
Well, you got to also mention Justin Chambers as Marlon Brando.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Because one of the best scenes is when they first meet Brando.
House? Yeah.
They go to his house, and that I know is accurate.
Yeah.
How that plays out for the most part, where he just like goes into character and you know, has the idea to put the Kleenex in his mouth, and that's all real. Yeah. That all took place.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know, Andrew, if he really did, or if it was at least part of it that he took the role just to, as he says, to piss off Sinatra?
Sinatra. I actually didn't know that, but that sounds like something he would do. So I
you know,
I would
like
not be
if it's
surprised.
not true, it should be, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the fact that Sinatra did not want this movie to be made.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you know, a younger generation may not realize that Frank Sinatra was heavily involved with the mob. You know, he was the chairman of the board, considered, you know, he was probably the most famous Italian American in America, and therefore, you know, knew a lot of people, you know, connected. And, you know, sometimes he would say, you know, I don't want this to happen. I want this to happen. And that's what would happen. So to see him in this and how, you know, his opposition scared off, what was his name? The first musician who's going to play. I'm trying now. We're all scrambling now to find.
Yeah.
It was Victimone.
Yeah, Victimone. Yeah.
Scared off Victimone. You know, from the role, and you know, then they had to, you know, bring in the guy who eventually played it. But yeah, it was just like Sinatra's key role in things. So many there were other little moments, like Robert Redford showing up when Al had to go and get to the set of the movie. What was the Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid. To recruit him. And I liked how they showed Ruddy's inventiveness and boldness and persistence in those things. So Puzo, in the beginning, where he's talking to his wife, who's about writing the book. He hasn't written the book yet at the beginning. And he tells he tells his wife his idea for the story, and he talks about why he should, his wife says to him why he should write about mobsters, right? Maybe this book is about finding the reason we would kill. What would you kill for? And that's an interesting approach, like, because mobster stories before that, mobster movies were just assumed that they're animals, that they're killers. And that's why the mafia was unhappy with the making of mobster movies. And she had the insight to say, maybe the story should be about finding out why, what would bring you to kill. And that's really, because she and he are immigrants who came from the same background, but they didn't become killers. So why do some become killers and some don't? And I really thought that was an interesting insight into the story and into a certain experience. But why do some become killers and some don't? What do you think?
Well, and of course they really fleshed that out, in the sequel, which is, I mean, it's, I don't know if I have a favorite one. I know the third Godfather's not my favorite, though reference our previous episodes. I enjoy them all, of course, but it's interesting just trying to, pretend you haven't seen the sequel, haven't seen Godfather 2 and go back and just think of the original movie, exploring that, and how do they explore that in the original movie? And it's the thing that I always come back to with all of these is I'm just profoundly fascinated, as again, we've talked about on our shows before too, at the specific understanding of Catholic faith, in this context.
Yep.
For these people in these situations. Because it's just, to me, it's so difficult, and I'm no angel, no saint, but by the same, like how, like Connie in the third movie, we talked about that last time about, go kill, go kill, who was it? Joey Zaza, kill Zaza. I'm gonna go over here and light a candle, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's like, how do you, I don't really know the answer to that, but the movie is so good at making these characters from the get-go. I mean, at least as early as Michael telling Kay at the wedding the story about Luca Brasi,
right?
As they're at the wedding, like, who you're dealing with as a film viewer, at least from that point on. And somehow, you're rooting for them, you're kind of in it with them. And that is, I think, an astonishing feat that they do that, and that it just does that the whole way through the movie.
Right. It just like, Sonny Michael Corleone says, they pull me back in, and it pulls us in. We're pulled almost against our will. We're part of it. We want to be, we're rooting for them. And it's interesting to see how intertwined, like you said, there's a religious understanding is, but how that can be perverted, how our faith, if we're not careful, can be perverted to justify things that ought not be justified.
Well, and by the same token, how you don't, like, I don't defend anything they do, right? Like, I mean, it's not like I'm watching it like, you know what? I got this problem with this guy I know, and this might be a good way to, like, no, not, it's never even a temptation.
Right.
But I feel like there is something in me that it doesn't make light of it, but gets an intuition into the complexity of just how distorted the fallen human nature is.
Yes.
So to just be a little more open to mercy, maybe in that way of just, or being more willing to pray for people, maybe that I wouldn't have otherwise. Maybe, maybe that happens. So,
yeah.
What was groundbreaking about the Godfather, and it laid a foundation for all mafia movies and TV shows that came after it. It humanized the mob boss type character. If you think of shows like Sopranos, where like, Tony Soprano is a horrible guy who's done horrible things, but he goes through all the different human feelings of being a father, being a husband, and he goes to a key part of that show is he goes to therapy, so it's right. Like if the like you mentioned, like mom movies before The Godfather were just, entertaining sort of pictures where, it was just a stereotypical sort of like mob guy that's that's bad and will kill people and will rob and whatever. But I think that was a key part of a key observation of what the book really was. It's like what can drive a human being to want to kill.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought that really, if you were to describe the theme or the point of the movie in a phrase, that would be it.
Mm. So the story itself is really a story of the offer is a story of three families. We have Coppola and the filmmakers as one family. We have Evans and the other executives, including at Gulf and Western, as another family. And then you have the mafia, the family. And Ruddy's job is to kind of jump between them, to balance them, to keep them at bay. It's basically he's juggling like the three balls in the air that he can't drop. And I thought that was a complex thing that I think they pretty successfully pulled off. Is showing us this complex dance of keeping these three different families satisfied and going, and and at times it seemed like it would never work, and it eventually does.
Well, it's a very accurate job description of what a producer does.
Yes.
I think, and like Mike described, it's a job description for a lot of different people. I mean, I'm a producer by trade as well, and so I can kind of relate to that. I mean, I work in Catholic media, but in a sense, that's essentially a lot of what I do is like making sure the talent's happy, making sure the people working behind the scenes are happy. Everyone's on time and on set. But a lot of times you're just dealing with different personalities, big or small. So I thought like that part of it is very believable, because if you ask any producer, even working today, that's essentially what their job description is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if anything, if you want to show some young person, if they ask what does a movie producer do, this would be a good, series to show it. Don't show older than teenager, please. But right. Yeah, if someone wants to know what a producer does, this is not a bad way of showing them, at an extreme level, perhaps. But yeah, you don't always have to deal with the mob. There is a point in the movie where Evans is describing the importance. In fact, he does this several times, talks about the importance of movies to the people. And it's not just because Gulf and Western and Blue Horn are always about it's a product. We need to make money off of it. We need to sell it. And Evans says it's more than just a thing to sell. And in fact, at one point he describes going to the movies like a religious experience. He compares it to a liturgy, and the darkened movie theater became my church, he says. What did y'all think of his description there?
I knew that would come up, and that gave me chills. I wish I had written it down, but he gets so serious because if I remember correctly, the guy comes in and says it's time for the dailies, and Peter's like, Bob, we don't have time for the dailies. Like, let me tell you something, Bubby, and he gives this whole speech about how he went and saw, wasn't it Errol Flynn, I think, as Robin Hood or something, right, when he was a kid. And that whole build up, and he gets to the end, and he's like, we make the magic, you and me now, we're the high priests, I'm like, whoa. And then he gets to the end, he's like, it's time to go to temple, and I'm just like, wow, like what an amazing expression of the sort of worst case scenario for the impulse God gives us. I was just talking to my students today about this. We're talking about natural revelation. So the school year's starting out. I have freshmen. I'm trying to walk them through the first week or so of school to say, like, look, this whole question about God is not just something like so many people will tell you, that's just a matter of faith. Like, I just believe something there's no good reason to believe, So I'm trying to walk them through the rational, aspect of this, that God gave us faith and reason, and that we are, instinctively religious creatures, right? Like, we are designed to be oriented toward transcendence, towards God. As Augustine says, our hearts are restless till they rest in you. So this idea of like how dangerous it is when you attach that nascent restlessness too much to anything, whether it's drugs or whatever. And you see in Evans that attitude, I think, is honestly, the same thing that's going wrong in him towards cocaine.
Right.
And so it's so that just, the broken nature of, in one sense, it gives him this drive to make these movies and have that persistence, but clearly something's off.
Right.
It's too anchored in that,
The movies have become his idol. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a danger where any art can become an end in of itself. Art should always be a depiction of what is good and true and beautiful, which ultimately comes from God. But if you lose sight of that, it becomes an end in of itself. And because he wasn't in it just for the money. Obviously, he was making a lot of money, you could tell. But he wasn't just in it for the money. He was in it for the sake of the creative act. But even then, when you divorce that good from the ultimate good of God, it becomes an evil. And you could see that in the way his life fell apart when, Ali McGraw left him.
Yeah.
So I thought one of the interesting turns in the movie was how the mob was so opposed to this film in the beginning. There was just no way they were going to allow this movie to be made. And then it turns, and in fact, they kind of become patrons. Columbo becomes a patron of the movie when Ruddy meets with Columbo. And it turns out, as long as they don't say mafia in the movie, Columbo's okay with it. I thought this was hysterical because then Ruddy goes to Coppola and says, how many times does the word mafia appear in the script? Once? Okay. Can we take it out? Sure. No problem. Whatever. It wasn't even a big deal. It wasn't even a problem. And I thought that was so funny.
Yeah. It's all about PR for the mafia, Right.
Like, well,
as long as you don't call them the mafia, then no, you can't attach it to us.
Right. So Columbo started this Italian-American Rights League, and he kind of modeled it on like the NAACP and Martin Luther King, and because of the bad PR against Italians. And it's like deeply ironic because, in fact, they are the mobsters. They are exactly what the media is saying they are. And it's just kind of this lack of self-understanding that you see. And it was a real thing. The Italian American Rights League really did exist. And the other mob leaders, the other mob bosses are all kind of like, Joe, I think you're bringing a little too much attention to us. You need to dial it back. You need to shut it down. And of course, it became a way for them to steal money, to make money. They were funneling the money that was being donated to it. They were laundering the money through this organization to them. And so, I mean, I just found it a deeply ironic and kind of funny in a dark way, commentary on the mobsters.
Well, like the meeting with Al's first meeting with Joe Colombo, and he's walking over and he's just like, if I wanted you dead, I would have killed you already. I'm just kidding. And sits down and then he's like, yeah, you're chatting or respect, all this, and it's just like, you're like, what does he say? You like musicals or Westerns? And he's like, oh, Westerns. He's like, me too. Now go back and make it, like, it's not like a request. Like, clearly this is a threat, and
right.
Like in that same conversation, it's kind of ironic.
Yep. So we have one of the other scenes I really liked, and you guys can jump in with any scenes if you wanted to talk about them as I go. But there was another scene that really jumps out for me was the actors' dinner, the family dinner.
Yeah.
When they all kind of just fell into character. Marlon Brando became Don Corleone, and right down to where they had the I'm always forgetting the different characters' names, but the Sonny Grosso, who was, I think it was the Talia Shire's husband. What's her name?
Connie's husband,
Carl, right?
Carlo, yeah.
Who was the abusive husband, and in fact, and so they kind of treat him like the jerk he is at this table, and it was fascinating to see how all the actors kind of fell into the characters around the Don. I really liked that. That was a very subtly done thing. It was really good.
And Andrew, you probably know more about this than me, but I got to say that when later on they have they're just talking and you see Talia Shire run by crying, and that whole build up to he actually Giovanni. What was is that his name? I think.
Sonny.
Yeah, or the actor who played Carlo.
Carmine Giovinazzo. Yeah.
Okay, because she's talking about him, and I was looking him up too. You guys are probably doing a lot of this, too, with just like the fact and fiction stuff, but there's definitely some stuff about him that's not exactly doesn't exactly look very good,
right?
And I don't know that I couldn't find any actual claims, at least, or any like proof that he actually did hit her or anything on set, but I really gotta say I love the buildup of that in the context of the show of like, I'll take care of it. And then him going to Jimmy Kahn and being like, hey, could you do me a favor? Because from what I did read, like it did get rough, but he always claimed that it was just like, part of it. And so I don't know the truth to it, but I really enjoyed the way the show doesn't show it, but we know that scene so well. And it's just seeing them watch it like, we didn't rehearse that, or that's not what we choreographed. And like, should I cut it? And now, like, just let it go another.
Because it was pretty brutal when they went on screen. Yeah,
it's a great scene. Yeah,
just to talk about that dinner scene. Like, yeah, that really did happen.
Yeah,
that dinner scene. Yeah, that dinner scene really did. It was just like, and this happens on a lot of sets where, whether it's like a formal rehearsal or it's like, they're just about to get into filming, like the actors will just start getting into character and, like maybe it was like one, it might have been like one actor that just started, and then there was sort of like this silent agreement, like, hey, let's all just get into character now.
Yeah.
I thought it was, it really depicted like how like they Coppola fought so hard to have this cast and to see them all in their element and to really see like okay, this is when, if you were like a fly on that wall, like this is you could see like, wow, they're about to make something special,
right,
with this group of people.
Right. And you could see it in the faces of the act of, Ruddy and Coppola, like they knew this was special. That all that fighting to get, Al Pacino over the objections of Evans and, and the others, it is going to pay off. Like they knew it. One thing I want to point out is the actor who played Carlo in The Godfather is Johnny Russo, but in The Offer, they identified him as Sonny Grosso. So they changed the name of the actor, I think, so that they're not libeling the real actor. Whether something actually did or not is probably not provable, and therefore they don't want to get sued for implying. I think that's the probably why they did that. But like it would be a really bad idea if you're in a scene where you have to get beat up to hurt the director's sister beforehand. I just think that would be a bad idea, but anyway. So another great scene is after Ruddy gets fired. At one point he gets fired as producer. Betty goes to Joe Colombo for him to use his power to get Ruddy back on the movie. She takes control. She's and there are times when she goes to Bluthorn and he's enamored of her, and she tells him what's up. And in some ways, Betty is more important than Ruddy to the making of this movie. Like she goes and gets Bluthorn to do things that need to be done. She goes to Columbo and gets him to do the thing that needs to be done. And I just think that was a fascinating character moment. I don't know how real that is to what actually happened. Although by all accounts, Betty McCart was a real amazing agent afterward, which is what the movie says she did. So I thought that was a really good scene. I think Brando in this comes off as less weird and crazy than pop culture has us believe. In fact, he seems to be one of the calmer of everyone. In fact, most of the actors come across much better than the people making the movies, around them. I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect to this. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought, Brando didn't get really crazy until way after this movie. I mean, you could tell. I mean, again, in that scene where, they go to meet him, and you could tell, like, this is a peculiar guy. This is not like your run of the mill. Like, he's not even an eccentric Hollywood actor. Like, he's something else. He's something you can't really describe. Just the way that he interacts and the way that he carries himself. And he does have a big ego, but his brilliance is always on display. So I thought that was a good portrayal of him. And the way Al Pacino's character is portrayed, I thought had to have been very accurate. I mean, one of my favorite scenes is when Coppola and Pacino are preparing for the big scene that got moved up, the scene where he goes to the bathroom to grab the gun. That's a great scene because it shows, like, well, how much pressure they both felt, filming this movie. And it's the scene, like, got moved up, and Pacino was nervous about it, and Coppola, being the brilliant director that he is, uses his actual nervousness to pour into the scene. That's what a good director does. Like, okay, use that, right? So, and obviously we've all seen the movie. He's crazy nervous right. doing that. He tells him, like, you're not showing it in the restaurant, you're trying to hide it, but you are nervous, to the bone. And
then he has the prop guy put the gun in a different place. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a true story. That's a real depiction. I thought, if you think of Pacino now, like, you would never imagine him being nervous on a set. Right. But this is Pacino when no one knew who he was, and they wanted a million different guys to play the role other than him. And he wasn't a leading man yet. So I thought that it really, the portrayals really served the series well.
Yeah. Well, I can I mention two real quick that I really liked. One of them was the just a quick one when they go to Sicily.
Love Sicily.
And it's beautiful, and this is great, and like it's like a moment of happiness, and they've had so much stress, and like they're sitting down for 20 seconds, the maitre d' guy, whatever, the waiter comes over, and he's just like, oh yeah, this is Mr. Bruno, he's like, oh yeah, he like, Al's shaking his hand, and he's like, he says, you come back tomorrow, and all this, and he's like, okay, and sees the guy go off into the side room, and Al's like, calls the waiter over, and he's like, Mr. Bruno, is he mafia? He's like, see, they run everything.
We're out of here.
In the car going, like, no, we're absolutely not, like, just not doing that. And then back to Brando. I just love, the little details, like and I don't know how many of them are true. I mean, they feel true. Like, it's like, that seems like where something like that would come from. But, showing up on set in the Don's office, and Al's like, got a coffee or whatever. And he's just like showing up, and where'd the cat come from? It's like,
that's real.
It's an alley cat. Just,
the cat was not in the script. Yeah.
He's like, I like it. And like, you just don't want to take it away from him. And then in that same scene, and when, by the way, the guy whoever played Bob Duvall, he doesn't have a big role in this, but he looked just like him. Yep. But I love as he turns around, he's got the huge cue card. He's like, what's on Duvall? He's like, oh, Brando doesn't memorize his lines. And they're like, okay,
that's accurate as well.
Go. Like, look, what does that matter to me?
Well, you're making the movie.
It's so great.
Yeah. I really liked. Was it? I think it was true. This whole thing about the film editor, the original film editor, and the associate producer Jack Ballard kind of undermining them, like sending the worst dailies to Bluthorn to kind of get Ruddy fired and Coppola fired and take over the movie and make their kind of gangster movie, which would have been one of the greatest tragedies of art ever. But I thought that was an interesting little interlude there to kind of show how cutthroat everything was, how you had to even just watch out for betrayal from within your own ranks. I mean, it really was. In some ways, the film crew was like the mob. The betrayal. You had the underhanded dealing, the backroom deals, all that sort of stuff. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, it's a real miracle that the movie got made.
That's the note I had.
And Coppola did not want to make the film, and he was struggling like just internally, like he felt like a sellout, doing this movie, and like he could have easily had given in, to the pressure, and it's like, what, I'll just do whatever the studio tells me, and I'll collect my paycheck, but right. Being the sort of auteur that he is, he couldn't let that happen. Speaking
of Sicily, because how can I let Sicily go without saying anything about it? But the land of my people. But I liked how when they got the cafe that Michael meets Apollonia in.
Yeah.
And then also meeting the actress who plays, the actress who will become Apollonia, the whole casting. I just those two scenes, it was hysterical because if you've ever been around Sicilian women, like there's a certain kind of Sicilian woman, like that just like she just walks in the room and all eyes are on her. It's just it was so true. Like the thing, and Sicilian men are like that.
I married one, so
there you go. I have a family of them. So it's kind of wild. So I really enjoyed that little scene. It was a bit of a she never shows up again. She's in one scene, which in actually in some ways it's like the Godfather itself. She's not in it much, but it was also fascinating to see how much of a shoestring all of that was. The whole Sicily part of that movie. How much they had to do with so little, over there.
Yeah. Well, and how important it really is, because he's harping on that the whole time, and like we know it watching it, and it's just like, yeah, it really does matter.
It makes the movie. Yeah. It really does. Yeah. It takes it to another level, just like in that being in that place. It does. I also like Lapidus's his redemption in a way. When Evans is off on his drug fueled binge and absent, and so Lapidus takes over and he's trying to do this terrible marketing for the movie. I mean, I think he's in charge of Amazon's marketing for Rings of Power now. I mean, like, it's just like a terrible marketing job. The posters are awful, and so, eventually he figures out Evans is a jerk, sure, but he's the right guy. Like, he knows what he's doing. Like you can dislike a guy and still recognize that he's the right guy for the job. And I really like that about the movie, where like everyone sort of is redeemed by the end. Again, except for Joe Gallo, who's killed, but everybody else is fairly much redeemed. And I really like that about the series. The truth is, in reality, Evans only lasted at Paramount a few more years. He actually went back into making films, producing films after this. He made Chinatown, which they mentioned quite a bit in this one. But
and the pitch for Chinatown is one of my favorite scenes, because he's just not like anyone who's ever just not been prepared for something at work,
Yeah,
and he's just like, water.
It's about water.
It's I'm like, oh, no.
I mean, yeah, technically it's about water. Oh man. So any other things about the series? I guess, well, actually, I wanted to say a couple other things about it. We talked a little bit about the final episode 10. They really jammed a lot in that final episode. Like, we get to, we have the debut, the biggest film of all time, winning the Oscar. Now he's going to have to go make Longest Yard and buy. Like, it was like all this stuff happening. It was kind of disconcerting a bit. I felt like there was a lot of extra fluff in the previous 9. Not a lot of extra, but there was fluff in the first 9, and then they crammed a lot into number 10. And I felt like that.
My feel was it's because I feel like they spent what they could have done with that big premiere on the previous episode when they show it to the mafia guys.
Right.
You know, I felt like it was more like it built up to the screening for the, you know, the secret screening for those, which, you know, made sense. But I don't know. I think they were going for like this, you know, it means more to these guys, you know, than like the big Hollywood premiere, which, okay, fair enough. But then you have like, this is the big premiere and it's just like them in a men's room and,
right.
You know, and it's
right.
funny, but it's just like, oh yeah, okay. Like I forgot what this, and you know, they just pop the door and listen to the applause. It's like, okay. So obviously, like if they had shown the audience watching it or something, that would have been, you know, dude, you don't want to do that twice. But yeah, I thought they could have done something more with that. You know.
How about you, Andrew? How'd you feel about the ending of that last episode?
Like I mentioned before, I thought, you know, there was probably a better ending there if they. Again, it made sense for Ruddy's character since he's the main character. I don't know if they needed to like go all the way to like him
on the set of
set of Longest Yard. I don't think that they probably stretched it out a little too much. And again, that might be that's probably a case of where Ruddy was really the point man or the storyteller of this series more than anyone. There's a movie coming out that Barry Levinson's directing called Francis and the Godfather. That is going to obviously, I mean, it's in the title. I'm sure it's going to focus more on Coppola.
Right.
And I'm very much looking forward to that. I mean, Oscar Isaac is playing Francis Ford Coppola. Jake Gyllenhaal is playing Evans. So it's it's in pre-production right now. I don't know if it's I don't think there's a date yet, but that movie is in the works.
We'll have to talk about that one when it comes out.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Exactly.
Keep the channel.
Yeah, right. Of course. Yeah. I think overall, what my expectation was to see more of a Coppola-centric story, because that's, again, the sort of tales that you hear from the making of the film have a lot to do with Coppola, and it makes sense. He's a director. He's a more decorated, sort of celebrity behind the scenes.
Right.
And you know, no one knew of Ruddy. So this was like Ruddy's story, sort of the untold story. So I thought that, again, overall it was a good show, but yeah, I thought the ending was, whatever, you know, over stuff like you mentioned, and maybe it should have just ended with the Oscar win or something. Right. But it was a little fluffed.
It is weird. Like you would expect conventionally, this should be told from Coppola's point of view, like this series. And I'm kind of glad in some ways that it is from Ruddy's point of view, because it is different, and I kind of like that. And I'm glad that they're making a movie about it from Coppola's point of view, because I still want to see that, you know, so it is interesting. So what do you think? Was Ruddy crazy to walk away from Godfather 2 for the Longest Yard? Like it was a guaranteed smash hit. It was going to be the big, a hit sequel. Was his reasons for walking away, do you think he was justified?
Well, you know, the way he expresses it, I think, makes sense, you know, that he sees it becoming like it's sort of its own world, you know, and seeing everybody else. But I don't know, by the same token, like he's stressed out before the big premiere about how like everybody's got something else going. What's his next thing? And then it makes it worse when he's there. And, Mario Puzo's got, $1 million for the treatment for Superman or something.
Yeah,
so it's not it's not just that they're all, doing The Godfather. I think it's more just, he doesn't see a real clear path forward for him at this point. So except this, this thing that he's had in the and it's a mind for a long time, and this is his opportunity to do it,
Right.
So I guess it makes sense.
And Hollywood's often about the next big thing. Like, what's your next thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I think I mean, I know the show portrays it that it was his choice. I think it might not have been his choice.
Was it?
I don't know if this is factual, but I'm pretty sure it's not that's not how the show portrays it. So I think he might have been contractually just left out of the sequel. And that could have been a lot of the bad blood that he built with the studio.
Right.
Because sure, the first movie was a smash hit, but if you don't make friends with the right people, then you're easily out on the street. So I would say that it could be either. I don't know. I would be surprised if it was his decision.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
It's a strange decision if you make it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Where everybody is coming back and you decide not to go after everything you went through to make the first one. Like you would have none of the obstacles making the second one that you had with the first one. So why not? So I think you're onto something. My guess is it makes more sense that he didn't have a choice.
It worked out for him. I mean, Longest Yard was very successul, and he went on to have a successful career. I mean, he's still working, right?
Yeah.
So I think it works with Clint Eastwood a lot. But it worked out for him. But like we both mentioned, I would be surprised if it was completely his choice.
Yeah, he eventually went on and produced $1 Million Baby, which is a big movie with won Oscars. But yeah, I mean, it makes it dramatically with Al Ruddy being the star. It dramatically having him forced out would be a downer ending, but having him go out on his own terms is a more a better ending in that sense. So I can see that. Any other things to say about The Offer? Mike, any last thoughts, notes?
No, I think, again, like the disclaimers, we've given a few times as far as a general recommendation, but, if you are able to handle the language, that kind of stuff, it's like I said at the beginning, it's definitely entertaining, the aesthetic, being able to see those sets, done so perfectly, like so precisely, it's just neat to kind of feel like you have a, backstage pass to that, even if it's definitely
right.
Coloring outside the lines with the, specific, details and stuff. So,
yeah.
But, and I think Mickey Cohen was still in jail for like tax evasion or something when that's completely made up, but it's like, I guess they figure like, who cares if we, throw Mickey Cohen into like, it's not,
right. It's based on a true story.
Yeah. Inspired by actual events is always my favorite. Like, what is that even? Like, what isn't?
Yeah.
Isn't.
Yeah, you can make anything. Star Wars is inspired by actual events.
Right. Yeah. So, no, I enjoyed it. It's fun.
How about you, Andrew? Last thoughts?
Yeah. I would just reiterate, like, if you haven't watched the show, just go into it, don't expect it to be like The Godfather. It's definitely telling. It's obviously telling the stories behind the scenes, and whether it's accurate or not, like, just know that it's a more of a the characters are like more caricatures, and that it's more about the Hollywood business, and it's entertaining in that way, and it throws in like these cool like if you were playing a Godfather trivia game, it's like, oh wow, that's how that scene was made, and that's what Brando did. Like there's all these little nuggets in there. But yeah, I would love like, whether that Barry Levinson movie ends up being made or not, I would love to see a more like serious or Coppola centric story behind it. In a film or a TV show. So, that's where I'm at.
For my part, if you're a Godfather fan, I'd watch it. If you are interested at all in how Hollywood made movies in the late 60s, early 70s, I'd watch it. If you like the 70s period pieces, definitely. I mean, and the acting, the performance, I loved the performances. And so it's, so many good actors in this. So in general, with the caveats that we gave about language and a little bit of violence, I think it's well worth the time. I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. Awesome. All right. Also, the horse's head story was really awesome. So you have to watch it to find out what really happened with the horse's head. All right. Let's take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of movies and TV shows, including Chris N., Deborah B., Bradley J., Cynthia A., and Melanie Q. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We would love to hear what you think of The Offer, or if you share a name with a mobster in one of these movies, like Tim Lucchese does, we would love to hear from you. And you can comment on the show by going to sqpn.com/secrets, or go to the StarQuest Facebook page, or send an email to secrets@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Until next time, Mike Creavey, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of The Offer.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Andrew Hermiz, thank you as well.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV shows on StarQuest.